All right, we're pleased to be joined by Pat Smith. You know him, WJOX Radio, three-man front, and of course, co-creator of the Paul Finebaum Show. Pat, any other titles we need to give you here?
No, sir. That's enough in my life. Thank you very much.
So as soon as Hugh Freeze lost another game that he should have won, you know, I don't know why, but I always think of you guys down there at three-man front. And then just, you know, how much fun you're going to have. Fun is the wrong word, but how much engagement you're going to have all week. But it seems to be compounding on itself based on Hugh Freeze and what he's got to say. And so, you know, first of all, thoughts on that and how's that going with your audience, sir?
Well, first off, I got to thank you because you have given us some gold sound bites when you've been a guest on the show. And listen, you were one of the very few people, and I'm not saying this because I'm on your program. I'm saying this because I'm being truthful. You're one of the first people to actually come on the show and kind of say, hey, guys, everyone needs to pump the brakes on this quarterback situation and Peyton Thorne at Auburn. Everybody just needs to hold up a little bit. I think Hugh Freeze shopping at Dollar General instead of going to an upper tier department store to find your quarterback, that could come back to haunt him. And those words were prophetic. And you caught a lot of hell for that. Not only the listeners to our show in Birmingham and across the state of Alabama, but also people that consume your product on your podcast. They wanted to know what the heck you were drinking when you said something like that. But you saw it. And it took a lot of us the first 3 weeks of the season to kind of say, you know what, SEC Mike might be right here. There's a problem brewing. And you saw the yo-yo activity that went on with obviously after the Cal game. And then you had the New Mexico game. Hank Brown was going to be, you know, a Heisman Trophy candidate possibly. And then you pull him at halftime of the Arkansas game. So bizarre activity. It has not played well for the Auburn faithful, not only because they're losing, but the fact that they're about to have their fifth home game to start the season, and they are staring at the barrel potentially of being 2-3, and that's something that many Auburn fans did not see coming down the road, so to speak.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess what do they say? A broken clock's right twice a day. But there was one Auburn show that called it the worst take of all time. So I thought I had a good time with that.
Well, one thing's for sure. When you're looking at 5 home games at Jordan-Hare Stadium, that is supposed to be the toughest place in America in college football to play, and you can't beat California, the power of the ACC, and you can't beat Arkansas, which everyone had bets at SEC Media Days is, okay, what week is Sam Pittman going to be fired? You know, he's the guy that's on the hot seat. Instead, they come to Auburn, and they beat you. They make you turn the ball over 5 times. And so now you got Oklahoma coming in that's got a very salty defense that made Tennessee, you know, look human when it comes to offense, only giving up 25 points. So this is a really interesting game, Mike. It really is, because you've got Oklahoma that can't move the ball. You got Auburn that loves to give the ball to the other team. Oklahoma's got a good defense. Auburn is decent from a defensive point of view. So it's going to be a make or break. It really will be for not only Hugh Freeze, but Brent Venables in this season for Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you saw this, Pat. I know you've been on the air today. You just got off doing Paul Finebaum Show, but John Talty over there, CBS Sports. You know, he's obviously, you know who that is.
Yep.
For the audience, you know, he's one of the best insiders out there, particularly when it comes to the SEC. He wrote an article today that said Freeze tried to get Talia Tagovailoa.
That's correct.
And he never even entered the portal. So that was news to me. Do you have any info on that?
Well, I can tell you the people that I have talked to that there was some real interest. At that time, of course, Talia had to, you know, go to the NCAA. He was looking for that additional year of eligibility because there was a question on the number of games he played as a freshman when he was at the University of Alabama. But there was some interest from both parties. Now, why that was not consummated, I have no idea, but it was serious. And so what John Talty writes is 1,000% correct that there was interest. But let's just be honest. Hugh Freeze told everybody back in May, he said, look, I believe in our quarterback room. I believe what we have. He said, I'm not going to go out and spend $1 million on a quarterback. I'm going to develop these guys just like I developed Malik Willis. Well, it just hasn't happened. And you've got all of this great young talent, whether it's Cam Coleman, whether it's some other pieces from the wide receiving core that you've got out of the transfer portal, some really nice pieces. But if you have a quarterback that turns the ball over and keeps giving it to the other team, it's kind of difficult to try to get the ball to your playmakers. So I can't stress enough how big of a game this is, and that's going to be kind of the appetizer early in the morning before it leads up to obviously the big one in Tuscaloosa.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's called out Cam Coleman too on national television.
He
So
did.
keep that up, Hugh. But let me ask you this: how influential though are the boosters down there? I mean, we all know Auburn's one of the weirdest places in college sports, but when it comes to the quarterback, because I've heard a lot of insinuation that he was going to stick with Thorne, and then something in the middle of last week changed, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, and then it was Hank Brown. And do you think there's, maybe if it's not even boosters, but it's Hugh Freeze making decisions to appease the fans that had turned on Peyton Thorne a couple weeks ago after the Cal game?
I do think that – I don't think it was a booster, but I do think Hugh is smart enough to understand SEC football and SEC fan bases. I do not think that boosters are, influencing what Hugh Freeze is doing or not doing. I think Hugh Freeze is stubborn. I think Hugh Freeze won 2 games against Nick Saban back 10 years ago, and he has been able to parlay that into a situation that you see him getting back in the SEC. Let's also be honest about the situation about the quarterbacks. If he doesn't want to pay $1 million for a quarterback, I think that if he went to a certain booster or two and said, you know what, we've got to have a quarterback to put us over the top because we've got Cam Coleman coming in. We've got all these other great young talent coming in from the recruiting cycle. We need a quarterback. They would have found a way to make sure they had a quarterback. But he is hell-bent on developing quarterbacks. He just has not done a very good job at Auburn. And he put all of his chips in the middle of the table for Peyton Thorne because he said, look, Peyton Thorne, I've watched his tape at Michigan State 1,000 times. And he maintains that he had 2 wide receivers that went to the NFL in East Lansing. Based on what we have at Auburn, he thinks that talent is better than what they had in East Lansing. So Peyton Thorne should be able to have the kind of year that Auburn needs him to have. Not be a Heisman Trophy candidate, but be a quarterback that not only can manage this offense, but can use his leg on some RPOs and get the ball out in space to those guys. Unfortunately, it just has not worked, whether it's the play calling, whether it's the pressure, whatever the case may be, it just has not happened.
Yeah, you referenced his 2 wins over Nick Saban. He should have had 4. I don't know if you remember that from a couple weeks ago.
It's amazing how he thinks it's amazing how he thinks he should have 4 or 5 wins against Nick Saban, but he can't get the second win against Sam Pittman. It makes no sense, Mike. Listen, the NFL is accused of script writing every Sunday. I can't make this stuff up, what we have to deal with in the state of Alabama. It's great having Alabama and Auburn on both sides to kind of equal it out of checks and balances, but thank you, Hugh, for giving us a ton of content this week. It's been fantastic.
And you keep alluding to how big this game will be. So, again, for those that don't know the schedule, Oklahoma, final home game out of this 5 stretch, and then at Georgia, at Mizzou, and at Kentucky. Now, they could beat Kentucky. They could conceivably beat Missouri the way they're playing, but I don't think I'd favor them in any of these games and they're not favored against Oklahoma. So if they lose on Saturday to Oklahoma at home, what's the likelihood that we're sitting here at 2-6? You think?
I think there's a distinct possibility if you lose Saturday, you're third in a 5-game stretch at home. You could potentially be looking at realistically a 3-9, 4-8 football team, because you and I both know in this day and age of NIL, look what happened at USC this week. You got players deciding, okay, I'm going to go ahead and bow out, and I'm going to try to save a redshirt season. I'm going to move on, get into the transfer portal. That's the problem that you have now with this NIL. Not only Auburn, but other programs around the SEC. We used to see, Mike, people opt out of bowl games because I don't need to play. Why am I going to put my body at risk when I can go play in the NFL, mess up my combine status? I don't need to do that. Well, now you're going to have players midway through the season. They're going to go, you know what? Why do I want to play on this bad football team and risk injury and play in a game that means absolutely nothing to this football team or to my career? So you're going to start seeing some problems in the locker room. But I'm telling you this, I've seen this a lot when it comes to Auburn football. Every time somebody decides that they're going to check the box and say they're done, they win a game that they're not supposed to win. You have a prayer at Jordan Hare. You have the kick six. You have something crazy to happen because that's just an odd place to play football. So if they get that win against Oklahoma, I'm not saying that their quarterback problems are going to be fixed, Mike, but I do believe that this Auburn football team, they're not going to beat Georgia, by the way, but I think that they could put themselves back in a situation of being bowl eligible and maybe getting to 7 wins. But if they don't win this week, I just don't see how that momentum is going to be able to parlay that into a potential bowl game, even with 6 wins.
And even let's say they do go 3-9, or
Okay.
some horrible record like that. I don't want to sit here and say you're predicting this or you're guaranteeing anything, but is there any shot, even a 1% shot, that they move on from him?
No, not a chance. No, he is the Auburn football coach going into the 2025 season. What kind of pressure he's going to be? Yeah, whatever pressure he's going to be on, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be through the roof. But no, unless there is just something that we are not aware of going on behind the scenes. The people that I talk to, the things that they have done on the recruiting trail, things that they've got in the pipeline, I don't see them making a change no matter how bad it gets this year. Now, next year, completely different story, but this year he's safe.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've gone this far. We haven't even talked about the game of the week, maybe the game of the year, Pat. What are the odds here? Nick Saban, College game day, going to be in Tuscaloosa. What are the odds he picks Georgia to beat Alabama?
I don't think there's any chance. I know he has said what he has said during all of his game day appearances, in which he says, until somebody beats Georgia, Georgia is the team. He keeps saying that. Well, also keep in mind that they're going to be playing the game in Tuscaloosa on Saban Field. And on top of that, you've got a situation where Nick Saban is still being paid $500,000 by the University of Alabama. So just kind of keep that in mind. I do think that when it comes time for him to make the pick, he will say it will be a close game, but Alabama by this much against Georgia. I don't think he's going to pick against Alabama.
Right. It kind of reminds me, we have a running joke on our show. So I grew up in a little town called Morristown, and they had a Morristown Honda, and they would predict the score of every Tennessee game on Friday. And it didn't matter if they were facing number 1 Alabama. If it'd be Tennessee wins by 1, 13-12. Now, if it was UT Martin, it'd say 55-0. But
right.
Whatever the odds are, you can't go against the home team.
No, you can't. And listen, but if he's been consistent the whole time, in which you've heard him say it, he said, look, until somebody beats Georgia, Georgia's my number 1 team in America. So maybe he changes that philosophy on Saturday morning and gets caught up in the pageantry of game day being in Tuscaloosa. Here's a fun fact for you. The 19th time that game day has been in Tuscaloosa, Alabama is 9-9 in those games when game day comes calling. So they're a 500 football team, Michael, when game day comes calling. So we'll see what happens.
Do you think, obviously the Iron Bowl in Auburn, that's your main rival down there if you're an Alabama fan, but do you think in that building truly they think that Georgia is their main rival?
Not really. We did a poll question this week, Michael, in which we asked the audience, if we could tell you that Alabama was going to go 11-1 on the season, which one of these 4 games would you be willing to lose? Okay. Which one? We gave them Auburn. We knew that wasn't going to be the one. Okay. Auburn, Georgia, Tennessee, or LSU. Overwhelmingly, over 50% of the poll said they would take a loss to Georgia. It's not that the rivalry with Tennessee's got historical relevance. You've got LSU. That's also got some bad blood there. Auburn speaks for itself, but there's really not a lot of bad blood with Georgia. Even before Nick Saban got there, the rivalry was pretty healthy, a little bit back and forth between the two teams in regards to wins and losses. But until Nick got there to really, make Kirby his little kid, it's a situation where, it was a really good, fun rivalry. And maybe that's because the Bama side, they won more than they lost. But there's not that vitriol, there's not a lot of ugliness like it was with Phillip Fulmer when he was at Tennessee, or what went on, against LSU and Burrow and stuff, and Ed O. So, no, it's really not that big of a deal. I mean, if Alabama loses, Alabama understands their schedule is tough enough to where they can make up that loss down the road, whether it's at Tennessee, Baton Rouge, Norman, Mizzou has to come to Tuscaloosa. And the same thing can be said about Georgia. If Georgia loses in Tuscaloosa, then they can rebound by beating the crap out of Auburn. Then they can go to Austin and get a win, beat Ole Miss, maybe beat Tennessee. So there's room now. There's mulligans on this schedule for all these teams. It's not as high pressurized as it was, Michael, a couple of years ago, where if you lost one game in conference, you might be sweating on Selection Sunday. And that's just not the case now.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think has the quarterback edge in this game? Carson Beck, a lot of people tout him as a number 1 overall pick. Jalen Milroe, I think, though, is looking as good as he ever has. And heck, he beat Georgia head-to-head last season. So who do you think has the quarterback edge in this matchup?
Well, for sure, it's going to be close because if you look statistically speaking, you've got Milroe averaging, I think, 249 yards per game of offense. Carson Beck, I think, 245, 246. So that's kind of a wash there. But I think what Jalen Milroe brings to the table with his legs and what Kalen DeBoer likes to – basically, Jalen Milroe is a running back. And with his propensity to be able to throw the ball deep with Ryan Williams, that's to me the biggest difference in this game this year than the one in the SEC championship game. I know Brock Bowers and McConkey, I know they were beat up in the SEC championship game. But Georgia, they've got great players, but they don't have those type guys like they had in last year's roster. Whereas Alabama's got Ryan Williams on the outside. The biggest concern if I'm Alabama is their ability to stop ETN running the football, because Alabama's Achilles has not been their secondary so far. It's been giving up big chunks of yardage on the ground. You saw it in Madison against Wisconsin. You saw it against South Florida, of all teams. That's an area I think Kirby and Georgia, they feel good about trying to manipulate Alabama. But I think Alabama feels really good, a quiet confidence, I've been told this last week, with their game plan. They think they can move the ball against this Georgia defense, which is an outstanding defense, but this isn't the record-setting type of defense you saw a couple years ago that shut everybody down.
Mm-hmm. Any chance that Kalen DeBoer loses any Alabama fans if he loses this game? I'm saying not fire the guy or anything like that, but if any, what percentage of Alabama fans will be upset that he's not Nick Saban?
I would say the moment it hit triple zeros and Georgia is ahead of Alabama, I would say probably 45 to 50% will be upset that they won't see the long. I mean, seriously. I mean, that's just the way it is here. I mean, I remember when Gene Stallings was hired at Alabama. He started out 0-3. Okay, they wanted to fire him, wanted to get rid of him. I mean, he had lost three games to teams that he had no business losing to. But it was like, okay, just take it easy. Let's and look what happened. He wins a national championship in 2 years. So I think everyone sees Kalen DeBoer and what he brings to the table. It would be a huge statement for him to be able to get a win. But the sane Alabama fan, and that might be an oxymoron to some people that watch this, but to the sane Alabama fan, they understand that there's a bigger game the third Saturday in October at Tennessee. And then there's another big game going on in Baton Rouge and then in Norman. I mean, there's more to this season than just a one-game season. It would go a long way for him to win, but you know how it is in the SEC. I mean, you could be on cloud nine and then you lose a game and then all of a sudden you're on a hot seat list. And not saying they're going to do that to him, but some of the goodwill that he has been able to gather and put in escrow for the last 4 or 5 months, it's undoubtedly it's going to happen. There will be criticism galore come Monday.
Mm-hmm. Now, you may have just answered this, Pat, but what's your confidence that the winner of Saturday night makes it to the SEC championship game, or is there just way too much football for you to have confidence in either one to accomplish that?
There's too much football for me to because obviously with Texas and Ole Miss's easy schedule, those two teams might be on a collision course for Atlanta and Georgia and Bama not. But I feel very confident that the winner of this game between Alabama and Georgia will be a locked-in member of the college football playoff. I feel firmly about that. And even if a team loses, there's enough on Georgia and Alabama's schedule. I know I sound like a broken record, but I just think that it's like a college basketball team. They've got enough games on their schedule from a net ranking standpoint that can put yourself in a conversation to get into the playoffs. And I think that's what will happen to the loser. It will be disappointing to the fan bases. We'll have some fun on your podcast and on our radio show. But at the end of the day, it will not be the end of the season for either team.
All right, last question I have for you, Pat. Really appreciate your time. I was listening to Three Man Front last week. Again, everybody go check it out. If you can't catch it live, I listen to it via the podcast form. Yeah. It's great. If you feel comfortable sharing, if you don't, I mean, you brought it up, so I figured you'd be all right. But I've never asked you this, but I heard you say on the field of the SEC championship, Phillip Fulmer, legendary Tennessee coach, called you guys some Bitches. I think is what
That's right. That's correct.
Can you share the story there?
Yeah. In a nutshell, the Cliff Note version, basically what happened was, so we had always had a really bad relationship with Phillip Fulmer because some of the people that we were involved with ended up suing, trying to get some information out of Phil Fulmer. Phil Fulmer did not come to SEC football media days in Birmingham because he was afraid he was going to be given a subpoena. So he did not show up. So there was always this really bad relationship with us and Phillip Fulmer. And so we happened to be standing on the field hours before an SEC championship game. And at that time, Phillip Fulmer was doing some broadcast work for CBS. And so Paul, myself, and my assistant producer, Kerry Adams, we're literally standing on the end zone back line. Nobody's around us. It's just us. And so Phillip Fulmer, whether he didn't see us until the last 5 or 10 steps before he comes to us, he kind of looks up and he sees us. And as he kind of makes eye contact with Paul, and I'm standing next to Paul, and he just looks at us under his breath. He goes, "Bitches," and just keeps on walking. And so Paul looks at me. I look at Paul. I look at Kerry. And we just start dying. We just start dying laughing. We're like going, did we just hear him say what we thought we heard him? What? And it was like one of those moments that was like going, there's no way we just heard that. There's no way that Phil Fulmer just called us bitches as he walked away, but he did. And it's a great story. So, hey, all's fair in love and war. All's good.
And I said last question, but I do have a write-in from,
sure.
I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Cousin Shane.
Oh,
he
I
had
love
a question
Cousin
for
Shane.
You.
Love him.
Will you and Paul be in the suite with President Trump this weekend?
Oh, I got something interesting for you about the suite. To answer that question, the answer is no. Now, I do know, I think Paul Finebaum will be at Tommy Tuberville's birthday party Friday night down at Auburn. I can tell you that. But no, I will not be in this box, but apparently, former President Trump, his food requests for the game, I don't know if you saw this, but in the suite, he has requested 2 McDonald's chicken filet of fish sandwiches. I'm just going filet of fish sandwiches with cheese.
Right.
He wants 2 of those. He wants some Domino's pizza. He wants Diet Coke and stadium hot dogs. That's what he wants in the suite as he's watching the game. That's verified. You can take that to the bank. So 2 McDonald's, filet of fish with cheese, Domino's pizza, stadium hot dogs, and Diet Coke.
Right. See, you got the scoop on everything. That's why people should be listening to the Three Man Front before you go, Pat. Tell people, how can they listen to the show and how can they follow you?
Absolutely. Listen, we appreciate everybody tuning us in. We're now on YouTube, so that's crazy. You can watch the show as well. On YouTube, you can follow us at JOX945 TV. On Twitter, the number 3 Man Front, and you can follow me on Twitter. Hope you do at Pat Smith Radio. So always appreciate the time, Mike. It's always fun.